article was about that study. The name of the article was "A Soldier's Requiem Never Fades Away," written by James Dow from the New York Times. The writer refers to people who anonymously paid respects to Lieutenant Colonel Paul Finken at his grave in Earling, Iowa. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Finken's grave, or the article also reflected Mrs. Finken's and her three daughters, how they handled the death of her husband and the father of the children. Now let me go back in time. That article showed up in 2013. Let me go back to November of 2006, 7 years before the article appeared in the New York Times. Colonel Finken was the head of a unit of the 101st Air Assault Division in Baghdad. Specifically, the 506 Regiment portrayed in the series The Band of Brothers, the team responsible for training Iraqi soldiers in Baghdad. My son, Chris, at the time was a captain, a young captain. He was Colonel Finken's counterintelligence officer. I'm going to move forward a little bit. On November 2nd, 2006, as Colonel Finken was escorting his incoming replacement, Lieutenant Colonel Aaron Kruger, as he was showing him the geographic area of operations outside of the security compound, a bomb exploded under the Humvee, killing Lieutenant Colonel Finken, Lieutenant Colonel Kruger, and a sergeant who was manning the machine gun turret on the Humvee. Colonel Finken was 40 years old, and he was 10 days short of coming home to see his family. In the New York Times article, Mrs. Finken describes the visit she and her daughters made to Colonel Finken's grave to remember him on his 46th birthday in 2012. Each time they visited the grave, they would find evidence of others who paid their respects anonymously. Like the young man a few years before who emerged from the men's room of a local restaurant in his dress uniform and delivered a beer to the colonel's grave. Mrs. Finken had no idea who he was, only that he cared enough to come. When I finished reading the article, I remembered a conversation I had with my son Chris when he returned from that deployment in 2007. He mentioned that his commander had been killed by an explosion while in a Humvee, and that he had gone to visit his grave. I vaguely remember the conversation, but when I read this article, it started to ring bells in my head. I immediately called Chris, then a major station at Fort Huachuca, Arizona. I asked Chris if he was the one who visited the grave and left the beer at the gravesite. He responded, "I drove into the town of Earling, Iowa, and stopped at a restaurant to ask for the location of the cemetery. I was given directions. Before leaving the restaurant, I used the men's room to change in my dress uniform. I purchased a can of beer at the restaurant and drove to the cemetery.